ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्. From here, please, significance of the battle.
The significance of battle in the Gita. In the Gita, we have a conflict between two groups of people based on a historical event. One group was ready to compromise the means and go against the Dharma, even though Dharma is so very important. The other group was committed to maintaining the moral order, the Dharma. This conflict can also be looked upon as one between a person's common sense knowledge and what he or she wants to accomplish. An inner war, an inner Mahabharata, so to speak. After all, every war takes place first in one's mind and only later outside. The moral order is considered to be so important that a person will sacrifice everything for its sake. In the Mahabharata, there are many stories of such sacrifice. One story is about a man who gave up his kingdom and everything else he had in order to uphold the universal value of speaking truth. Because India is a place where dharma is important, it was referred to in the Gita as Dharmakshetra. The Veda rules the hearts of the people and everything subserves the order of dharma. In the country of Bharata, in a place called Kurukshetra, these two groups of people have assembled, prepared to fight. One group does not understand the value of values, and the other group does. All eyes were upon Arjuna, considered to be the greatest archer. Arjuna's driver was none other than Lord Krishna. The illustration of Arjuna seated in his magnificent chariot, drawn by white horses, driven by Lord Krishna, is very beautiful in that it relates to one's own life. This illustration also appears elsewhere in the Veda in the Kathopanishad.
Okay, we can continue.
The body chariot analogy. In this illustration, your body is likened to a chariot. Your senses are the horses, the mind is the reins, and your intellect, the buddhi, is the driver. You are the one who is seated in the chariot. In other words, you are the Swami, the master. If your buddhi is loose, if your understanding is not very clear, you can end up anywhere because your chariot, your physical body, will not take you to the destination.
So I want to pause here a little bit because, for a long time, I've been thinking about this Ratha Kalpana, the chariot analogy. So let me ask an open question. So over here it says the master who is of the chariot is you. What does this you refer to over here? What do you all think? Because some things are straightforward, right? For example, straightforward, not exactly, but let's say we talk about the chariot. That is the body. Okay, makes sense. Your horses are the five senses. Also makes sense. Very straightforward. Mind is the reins. Okay, the mind is the one which is connected to the senses, and so the way the senses play their music, that is how the mind will dance. So sort of the mind is connected to the senses, and then the buddhi is the one who is sort of behind. I won't say controlling, but it's more like behind the mind, where this processing, analytical, observational, decisive faculty is there. So that is the buddhi. Then what is this you? You are the one who is seated in the chariot. You are the Swami, the master. Who is this you?
Atma.
It- if that is the Atma, then here it says your understanding is if your understanding is not clear, you can end up anywhere because your chariot will not take you to the destination. So if the destination is moksha, does the Atma need to be taken to moksha? So then it cannot be the Atma. See, this is very curious because initially I thought in most contexts, as we talk about the you in the Gita, the you refers to the Atma in most contexts. But for some reason, this one never fit very well in my mind, that this you over here, the master, the Swami, cannot be the Atma. And then I read somewhere or I heard somewhere, I don't know which one it was, but it was Pujya Swamiji. And he mentioned that the you over here refers to the Ahankara, not the Atma. And that made everything very clear. And I want to do a deep dive into this portion because I was recently reading, I am currently reading Pujya Swamiji's Drik Drisha Viveka, his bhashya on that. Wherever or whenever I have doubts about anything, Pujya Swamiji just completely expels all of those doubts. There were so many doubts I didn't know I had, which were also eliminated by reading that book. So the reason the Ahankara is given a separate status is because of something called Tadatmya. Okay, has anybody heard this expression Tadatmya? It's an association. So let's get a little deep into this because we may not encounter it at least for the next several chapters, this particular idea. But I want us to keep it at the back of our mind, not only as we study Vedanta, but even as we, I guess, experience our day-to-day lives and to be able to see um, reality for what it is. So let's explore this a little bit. See, when we talk about the Atma, we're talking about Satchitananda Atma. Okay, there is no qualifier for the Atma. Satchitananda is not a qualifier. It is its Svarupa, its nature. It is what it is. It's not like a blue t-shirt or a red rose or whatever. These are not qualifiers or adjectives. It is its nature, Svarupa. So that is the Satchitananda Atma. Now, Satchit Ananda are not three different Swarupas of the Atma. Satchit Ananda is like a hyphenated statement. It is referring to the same Vastu. In again, here language is very restricted because when we say Vastu gives the sense of a thing like an object, like this is card, it's a Vastu. Here the Vastu is referring to the reality. Okay, when I say Vastu, I'm not referring to it colloquially, but I'm referring it to as a reality, as the very thing, as the only thing that exists, as the only substantive, as the only thing of substance, whereas everything else has a dependent reality. That is what we mean when we say Vastu. So this Atma Vastu is the Sad Vastu. And here Satchidananda is its Lakshana or its Swarupa, its nature. So you take any object, you take these earphones over here, and it's a nama rupa. You take this card and it's a nama rupa. Everything that you perceive, including space and time, is a nama rupa. It's a name and form. The whole jagat is nothing but names and forms. And the reason you can say it is only names and forms is because when you look at this as an earphone and then you decompose it into something more fundamental, it will reveal additional names and forms. You decompose those, and they will reveal additional names and forms. You decompose those, and there will be new names and forms again released as though. And it is locked up in our understanding. And as our understanding of this earphone becomes clearer, you'll see that behind it are more and more and more and more names and forms. Ultimately, if there's such a thing as ultimately, the final thing that this is Sat, it is existence. That is all that you can say with absolute authority and conviction. I cannot say with complete authority that this is an earphone. I can't say that because it is only from a certain standpoint that I call it an earphone. From a different standpoint, you could give it a chemical name that it's made of some sort of plastics, some plastic compound, or you can look at it from an atomic standpoint. From a quantum standpoint, you can say it's all made of like different I guess quantum states, and it's a vibration in a certain field. You can come up with all sorts of different names and forms depending on which vantage point you're. The thing that you cannot negate about this earphone or this card over here is that ultimately what it is it is existence, because it has its basis. The names and forms are superimposed, projected upon the substratum alone, the adhisthana, the sad vastu, which is existence. That's clear, right? Any questions? Okay. So now this sad vastu that we talk about, it is self-revealing. It is self-shining. If I need to know this card, I need to have a pair of eyes, I need to have the sense of sight to reveal. So there's a certain pramana. The chakshu is the organ, and the rupa is the sense of sight. The rupa pramana is the sense of sight that reveals this card. The card is revealed to me. It is not self-revealing. It has to be revealed. It has to be revealed by the sense organs, or the let's call it the pramana for now. Simple. Any sound is not self-revealing. It has to be revealed by the pramana. The pramana is the thing which reveals existence. When we talk about the Sadvastu, it is self-revealing in that I do not need any second entity to reveal myself. I am self-shining. I shine on my own accord. I don't require a pramana to know that I exist. That I exist is a given fact. There is nothing that needs to be revealed over here. Then the question is, why do you need Vedanta? If I don't need to reveal myself, why do you need Vedanta? Vedanta is not required to know that I exist. Vedanta is not required to know that I am. Vedanta is required to know what I am. And not only do I exist, but I am existence. And I am that existence which is self-shining, which is self-revealing, Swayam Bhati, Swayam Prakasha. That is what it is. Okay, then so that Swayam Prakasha, that self-revealing nature of existence is what we call Chit. So existence is Sat, which is ultimately you reduce every Nama Rupa, what remains is Sat, because all that there is only Sat, existence. But this existence is self-revealing, and therefore Chit. So this Satchit. Satchit is that one Vastu. Okay, and then Ananda. When we talk about Ananda, that is very straightforward. It is the easiest part. In the beginning, it is most confusing. Ananda, I have to experience bliss. No, that's all rubbish. Ananda simply is referring to the fullness. Existence cannot have a limitation. One name and form can limit another name and form. If I say this is this, it cannot be that. If I say that is that, it cannot be this. If I say this is blue, it cannot be red. If I say it is pink, it cannot be orange. Every name and form is mutually contradictory. Existence has no such limitations because all adjectives, you know, this I had this thought. I was writing something and I thought about it. We often, when we glorify somebody, it could be somebody you're trying to woo in college or whatever it may be, we use a lot of adjectives. Oh, you're so nice, you're so lovely, you're so beautiful, you're so this is, and we think that the more adjectives we use, the greater we are making the person. But if you realize, the more adjectives you're using, the more you're limiting the person, because every adjective precludes them from being something else. So if we use any adjectives for the Atma, we've created limitations. You can't say the Atma is blue, you can't say it is white, you can't say it is red, you can't say it is black, you cannot say it is big. If it's big, it cannot be small. If it's small, it cannot be big. Every adjective is a limiter. And so the Atma is that which is free of all adjectives. And it has no limitations, and therefore Anandam. So what is Satchit is Anandam, it is full, it is complete, it is whole, it is impartite. Impartite means without any division. That is Satchitananda. So now that we understand this Satchitananda, where am I headed? We are talking about this chariot analogy. So let's understand this a little carefully. Body, okay, we understand there's a body, it is a conscious body, we understand that. Drik Drishya Viveka talks about three types of tadatmyas. Okay, the three types of tadatmyas are called Sahaja Tadatmya, uh, uh, Karmaja Tadatmya, and Brantija Tadatmya. I'll explain each of these a little bit afterwards. I'm just putting these words out for now, technically speaking. Let's understand what the Atma is, not what it does, because it doesn't do anything. The Atma, being the stuff, the substance of everything, if you talk about your Antakarana, for instance, your Antakarana appears to be a conscious entity. There is something called Chit Chaya. Has anybody heard of Chit Chaya? Chit Chaya. Okay, so there's an expression, reflected consciousness. You might have heard of that expression. Pujya Samji says he doesn't like that expression very much. He explains it in Digdasha Viveka. He says that I don't use this example much because it gives the sense that there is something Atma and there is something that's a medium, a reflecting medium. And the Atma as though reflects off the reflecting medium, and that reflecting medium as though comes alive. It creates a problematic category in our mind because it still is a very dualistic example. Because if I talk about a reflecting medium, and if I talk about something being reflected like original consciousness or whatever, it creates problems because it creates a sense that there is something that is different from the other thing that is being reflected. And that's a problem. So rather, the way to look at it is when you use the word adhisthana, think about the Atma as that which is existence and every other object that exists, including space, including time, including matter, energy, the universe, your card, whatever it may be, has its basis, its being in this existence, which is Satchitanma. Now, there are certain objects based on the way the Nama Rupas are configured, which are very inert. This card is inert. Hopefully, I am not inert as an individual. From the individual standpoint. I'm able to speak, I'm able to cognize. Now, so certain, when we talk about the Satchit Atma, the Sat Swarupa of the Atma is evident everywhere because everything exists. The Chit Swarupa of the Atma, depending on what object is manifest, may or may not fully manifest the Chit Swarupa of the Atma appropriately or fully. So this card does not fully manifest the Chit Swarupa of the Atma. Even human beings do not fully manifest it because we all have a certain, how is it manifest? It is manifest through sattva. The sattva is like a very clear, lake, you can say, and it's able to permeate the light from the sunlight to the bottom of the lake, whatever. So it's very clear, and that sattva is allows one to imbibe sentience. So the only sentience, the only actual consciousness is the chit. But owing to the sattvic nature of the mind, because the mind is made of the what do you call it? The sattvamsha of the panchabhutas, which is the sattvic essence of the five elements. Due to that, the mind automatically is able to appear and manifest sentience. The mind I'm referring to here as this embodiment of the sukshma sharira. Let's call it the sukshma sharira for now. So the sukshma sharira, as though, displays sentience, and it is able to light up the world in its purview, and it is also able to light itself up in the sense that if there is a thought is a vritti. A vritti is a thought that flits up in the sukshma shrira, and that thought is lit up, and that thought is known, and the one to whom it is known is the ahankara, and the thought that is known is the object that is known to the ahankara. But here's the catch: the ahankara, or the subject over here, itself is a thought. So this chit chaya, which we talked about, the chit chaya is the sentience of the mind that is able to, owing to its owing to its basis being the Atma, it's able to derive or as though borrow a certain limited form of sentience itself. Does that make sense? Because the minds are sentience. Atma is the only sentience, but every individual mind has different degrees of sentience. Okay, and so this sentience that the Sukshma Shrira is able to exhibit is what you call the Chitchaya. And we will not use reflected consciousness, but that is the Chitchaya. Okay, does that make sense what the Chitchaya is? Now, this Chitchaya has vrittis that pop up in the mind, in the Sukshma Shrira. There are two categories of vrittis, only two categories of vrittis, if you want to divide them simply. One is called idam vritti and the other is called the aham vritti. The idam vritti is, this is a card, an object. An object thought blossoms in the mind. See, there's an object out here, but it is only known when it is in here. Otherwise, if it's not known in here, I have no idea that there's an object out there. So every object that you perceive is first perceived in the mind. In fact, it is the only place where it is perceived. It is not perceived anywhere else. So that object is the idam vritti, and that's why it is the object vritti. Okay, vritti means thought. Let's hold on to that vocabulary word. Now there is something called the aham vritti. There is a thought form which is also subtle, which says that I am the knower of this card. That is the ahankara. The aham vritti, which is also a vritti, which is not the self. That aham vritti is the ahankara. Now, the difference between the aham vritti and the idam vritti is that the idam vritti can happily be there because the world of names and forms is perceived by the mind. There is no problem. The aham vritti is where there is a problem because that aham vritti is as though centered on my sense of self, because the subject is the subject that I define myself to be, whether it is true or not. Now, if I define the subject to be that I am the physical body, then I'll talk about all my bodily issues, and that is inherited in my notion of who I am as a subject. It is inherited by that ahamriti as this ahankara embodying this body. That if I take myself to be, oh, I am rich, I am poor, I am this and that, then there are certain conditions that uh, I am sort of in the midst of, which I also identify as. Or if I'm feeling happy, if I'm feeling sad, then here the ahankara, the ahamriti, has begun to identify with its feelings. Right? So the different koshas it starts identifying with, and it shifts and it ebbs and it flows, and these different identities are all ahamritis, which is the ahankara identifying with the different identities depending on where one is in their level of maturity, or even on a given, at a given hour of the day. Some days you feel more, you know, let down than others. Some days you feel quite sattvic also. So that ahamriti kind of changes course according to how the situation is on a given day. So now the question would be that the idam vritti is not a problem, as we spoke about. A card is a card. I can't deny it. It's there. It is what it is. The aham vritti is where the problem arises. When I take myself to be a limited person, the aham vritti takes itself to be a subject that is predisposed with a bunch of issues. Now, the idam vritti continues to change. I never mistake the card to be myself. I don't mistake these earphones to be myself. But the aham vritti seems to be a bit more sort of permanent. I won't call it completely permanent because it's not there in deep sleep. But it is sort of, it gives you a sense of permanence because it is always centered on the self, the sense of self, and the sense of self continues to dwell within the realm of being a karta or being a bhokta, which is I'm either a doer or I'm an enjoyer or I'm a knower. Now, this doer, the one who performs actions, this knower, the one to whom objects are perceived, and this enjoyer, the one who enjoys the pleasures of life. And enjoyer also means sufferer. I also suffer the consequences of life. These are all the aham vrittis. Now, does that make sense what the ahankara is? So that is the master that is being spoken about, that you are the one who seat in the chariot in the sense that I am the one who takes myself to be the subject. And what the subject is depends upon my level of understanding and my level of maturity as well. That's one point. Now, when we talked about the three types of tadatmyas, one second, my laptop's not charging. Okay. If the battery runs out, I'm not sure. Just a moment. So the three tadatmyas. So now we covered quite a few concepts, right? We talked about chikchaya, we talked about ahamriti, idamriti, we talked about the atma. So now consider this. Between the sukshma sharira and the chikchaya, or let's say not the sukshma sharira, but between the ahankara and the chikchaya, there is a very clear, um, how shall you say, association, tadatmya. It lights up. The sukshma sharira lights up. It lights up because it is bathed in the very self, which is Sachitananda Atma, and based on its composition, based on the way it is organized, the way it is put together, it represents consciousness. It reflects consciousness in some sense, reflecting like this. Okay, not really reflecting. And the ahankara, the sense of self, as it arises in the chitchaya, the light also lights up the sense of self. And so that is a very, it is a sahaja tadatmya, which is, it is a very natural thing. There's nothing to eliminate over here. The word sahaja means natural. It is not forced. It is not something that somebody does at some point. It is a very natural, the illumination of the mind and the illumination of the sense of self is a natural process. It is not to be fought. Then there is another kind of tadatmya called karmaja tadatmya, which is that the sukshma sharira, owing to, on account of chitchaya, also very naturally identifies and enlivens. When I say not identifies is not the right word, but enlivens the physical body. You pinch yourself. If you think you don't think you're conscious, pinch yourself. You'll see. You know that you are a conscious entity. The physical body is conscious. It is conscious. You cannot deny it because of association with that, with the Sukshma Sharira. So that is the Karmaja Tadatva. And Karmaja, because the physical body is born due to the Punya Karma of the Jiva. The Punya Karma of the Jiva gives rise to a certain result, and this result is called the physical body. This physical body allows you to experience life and to achieve whatever goals. It is a vehicle through which your goals are achieved, and therefore it is born of Punya Karma primarily. Of course, there could be certain genetic disorders and defects and whatnot, which are intermingled with some Papa Karma. But primarily, the physical body is put together, the human body particularly, is due to Punya Karma. So that this association is karma. That's why it's called karmaja. Born of ja means born of. So it is born of karma. And now this is what do you have to do about nothing? When the body falls, it will fall, and the association will be lost. Then there'll be a new association with another body. Okay, but this is called karmaja. The third one is brantija. The brantija is a problem. The first two are not problems because sahaja is not a problem. It is natural. Mind is conscious. That I have a sense of self. So what? You're conscious. You're a conscious creature. There's no denying that. There's no fighting it. Karmaja, the body is also conscious and derives sentience on account of associating with the Sukshma Shriya and Chaya. Okay, so be it, no problem. The third one, the Ahankara, takes itself and centers consciousness that is having its basis in the Atma. Now it mistakes, this is born of delusion, it is born of ignorance. It mistakes itself to be the conscious entity. And so the Ahankara, the subject, mistakes himself, herself, itself, whatever it may be, to be that consciousness, as opposed to recognizing that the consciousness is Atma alone and everything else is derived thereof. So this is called Brantija Tadatmya. And Branti means born of delusion, Brantija, born of delusion. And this has to be eliminated. How do you eliminate it? Through Jnanam. What Jnanam? Atma Jnanam. What is Atma? We spoke about it. So to reflect upon the Atma, one recognizes that the actual sentience belongs ultimately to the Atma and not in the Ahankara. It is okay that the Ahankara derives a sense of sentience. Okay, that is Sahaja. It is not okay to believe that this sentience is centered on myself as the Ahankara. The myself has to be replaced from the Ahankara to the Atma. And therefore, the Ahankara does not get destroyed, it gets sublated, it gets matured, it gets enlightened, it becomes knowledgeable. And it is this Ahankara which is the Jiva. When we talk about the Jiva, it is the Ahankara. It is this Ahankara which is the one that is seated in the chariot of life. And it is this Ahankara that has to reach its destination, which is self knowledge. So that is how you put this whole chariot example together. Does that make sense? The Ahankara has to be enlightened. The Ahankara, due to its mistaken notion of who it is, creates a panoply of all downstream problems of life. That's the example over here. Any thoughts, questions?
So the destination for this ahankara is knowledge of the Atma, or just the okay knowledge of the Atma.
Yes. Because when you say moksha, Adi Shankaracharya ji also says jnana eva moksha. Therefore, the destination is a destination because there's no place to go because it is you. And so the destination is only that removal of ignorance of who I am. It's very beautiful. And this puts everything so nicely together. Oh, it's just yeah, breathtaking. I really recommend reading Pujas. Like, just few days back I had this spontaneous sankalpa in my mind. It's like if I'm going to study Vedanta from books particularly, I'm going to at least try to exclusively stick to Pujaswami's books because he doesn't reveal new concepts. He knocks away concepts. And there's a big difference over there because concepts are just words upon words upon words. And that's all we deal with. Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa. One concept we'll talk about Savikalpa Samadhi. Somebody will say Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Somebody will say this, somebody will say that. Arey bhai, ultimately, one has to not, I won't say simplify the process, but clarify the process. And he does not turn Vedanta into a system. He looks at Vedanta as a tool to reveal. Vedanta is knowledge that reveals, and all of these prakriyas that we use, you use pot clay, you use gold and jewelry, and ocean and water and wave, and all of these prakriyas are to reveal the truth of the self. But sometimes, uh, over a course of history, what ends up happening is these prakriyas become systems, and systems become goals to accomplish. And the point of Vedanta is to basically break your our conditioning about seeing life in a very fixed manner, in a very rigid manner, and by giving too many categories to things. Because it reveals, but it also tells you that, okay, all of those things that you talked about so far, take them with a pinch of salt. Take them with a pinch of salt because this is not categorical. This is not a card from any other standpoint except this card. You look at it from a microscopic standpoint, it is not a card. You look at it from a galactic standpoint, it is certainly not a card. Right? The planet Earth looks like a marble from a distance. What trees? What forests? See, there is something called a tree. Yes. There is also something called a forest. From the standpoint of the individual tree, it is a tree. But when you take a collective view, now you see a forest. But now, if you see, if I want to subtract the forest and the trees from the forest, then there is no forest. But there is a name and form called a forest. And the name of and form of the forest has a certain functional identity. And it has a certain functional use also. It's very beautiful when you study the theory of complexity. It's all you know derived conclusions of Vedanta, because a tree is not capable of rainfall. But when you have a forest, collectively the trees are able to emit these, I forget what the substance is called, but it's able to emit a certain substance which is able to um, create these nuclei in the clouds, these particulates in the clouds around which water condenses and becomes heavy. The raindrops become heavy and they fall. And so a forest is able to attract rain, but a tree is not able to, because a tree, you can say, is a collection of trees is a forest, but the forest itself has a certain property that the tree does not have. A tree does not have, yes, it has its own ecosystem. You could have squirrels, you could have woodpeckers, you could have insects burrowing in the trees, you could have birds laying their eggs, and so on. The tree has its own ecosystem. But the ecosystem of the forest is far greater than the ecosystem of the tree. So the forest cannot just be looked upon as a collection of trees, because it is its own entity of sorts. And then the planet Earth is an entity of sorts. Think about it. You as an individual are an entity, but you as a family have certain dynamics that you cannot replicate by multiplying the individuals. And you as a society have even more dynamics. That's why mob mentality is a thing. An individual is not a mob, but when individuals come together, they are able to exude a certain fanaticism, a mob mentality where they can kill somebody on the road as well. So you see, the collection is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's why this Nama Rupa perspective of looking at the world is so powerful, because stop for a moment and look around you and realize that every single thing that you see is not really the thing that you see, but only the thing that you perceive from a certain vantage point. Then that's not sufficient, because then you can say, oh, nothing really exists. No, the truth of it all is Satchitananda Atma. Satchit Atma is the basis of everything that I see, and not just the basis of everything I see, but because what is it that I see? The Idam Vritti. It is also the basis of the one who sees, the Aham Vritti. And that is Satchit Atma. Satchit Atma is the truth of both the knower and the known. And when you recognize that, the self is seen everywhere. It is known as oneself, but it is not excluding the world around you. And everything is Ishvara. Very beautiful, because Ishvara and Atma are one and the same. There's no difference. Puja Samji talked about Maya also, that the way he explained Avarana Shakti, my goodness, I have, in all these years, my mind has not been captured the way like it was captured this week when he explained Avarana and Vikshepa. I did not understand it truly until I read Puja Samji, what Avarana and Vikshepa are. So I'll get into that like one whole session just explaining what Maya Shakti is. But wow, try to read that book, Digdasha Vivek, especially if you've studied Tattva Bodha. Okay, sorry. Any other questions? Should we close for the week? This was a lot to contemplate and think about. So yeah, let's do that and just think about it. That let this be an exercise that whatever you see around you is not the thing that you see. It's only a perception. It's only as though. And Pujya Samaji loved using that expression, as though, because as though does not dismiss it. I don't say this is not a credit card. It's an as though credit card. So then what do I say definitely? Satchitananda Swarupa. That's all it is. The one who sees and the thing that is being seen. Satchitananda. That is Nidhasanan. Try to keep this thought alive every single waking moment. And you will find that at some point it becomes natural. And this is the road to knowledge. This is what, it takes you to the destination. Knowledge. Dhyana Nishtha. Another thing Puju Swamiji explained in his Gita lectures also. Knowledge takes place with the pramana immediately. Yes. The self, you already know the self. Let's not assume that you don't know the self. You know the self. I know the self. It is known, not as an object, but as the very self. And if one understands what the Sachit Atma is, it is known. It is known as my own Swarupa, as the Swarupa of all that there is. Okay. So that is clear. We already know the Atma, not as an object, but as oneself. Now, what do we do about it? The work is done. It's a matter of seeing this truth everywhere. That's all. So many times we as Vedanta students have this romanticism that one day, I will experience the Atma, one day I will gain moksha, one day this knowledge will work for me. And if we already have the knowledge, that's the best part. The avidya has been knocked away through years and years and years of repeated exposure that you are Sachit Atma. There's not much more to do in terms of like getting the knowledge. The knowledge is there. What we need to do is to get nishtha, because life and the conditioning that we go through has put us in a certain paradigm where we see the world as different from what it is. And we just need to remind ourselves, because at this point it is a reminder, because what we are trying to gain right now is not jnana, it is jnana nishtha. It is firmness, abidance in this knowledge. And the more it abides, the longer will be its staying power, and at some point it will not go away. And at that point, one can say that, okay, Jivan Mukti. Because all that there is the Atma. Somebody comes and steps on your toe, instead of like, a curse word, you'll be like, Ishvara, Ishvara. My toe is hurt, Ishvara. My car has crashed, Ishvara. I have $1 million, Ishvara. I like this movie, Ishvara. I did not like this food, Ishvara. Everything is Ishvara, everything is Brahman, everything is the self. That nishtha has to be cultivated at all times. But knowledge is already there. So don't seek it. Because Pujya Sabri says, seeking denies the sought. The more you seek, you create an otherness between yourself and knowledge. You create an otherness, a distance between yourself and who you are. And that distance has already been bridged because we have exposure to the teaching. That bridge, we need to allow it to do its work. And every time there's a counter thought that, oh, I feel bad about myself, I feel guilty, I feel stupid, I feel small, I feel irresponsible, I feel I've not done enough, I feel I'm not helping these people enough, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Ask yourself, after all this exposure to Vedanta, what is this I centered upon? What is the upon? Is it centered upon the Atma, or is it centered upon a certain misconception about the self? Contemplate. Keep contemplating. Okay. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. See you all next week.